Oh, didn't see you there. I was just admiring the 9 best games for the PlayStation 4, as well as contemplating my own mortality, because the PlayStation is very nearly 8 years old, and it feels just like yesterday when it came out. But I have decided upon the top 9 games for the PlayStation 4. We begin, of course, with number 9, and it is Am Satsuna. Perhaps a brave choice. Yes, you might say it's a brave choice, and I would agree, because Am Satsuna is a very low-key RPG released by Square. And what I think it does is try to make a good, perhaps even great RPG on a very minimal budget. The graphics aren't a Final Fantasy 15. The music, however, is very good. I would say the piano music that they use, and I think it's actually exclusively a piano. I don't think there's any other musical instruments they use for the soundtrack of this game. I think every track in this game is low-key one of the better pieces of music that has been put out on the PlayStation 4. The story is intriguing. The combat is just Chrono Trigger, so can't go wrong with that. That's what makes Am Satsuna number 9. At number 8, we return to the perhaps now widely known fact that I am a man of culture, and we have Dead or Alive 5 Last Round. Now, I hear that Dead or Alive 6 has lost support, and I don't know if it was good or not because I haven't played it yet. But I am a huge fan of the Dead or Alive series, and I think 5 is probably the best Dead or Alive that we've had so far. I think the roster is amazing. I love all the different levels. I love all of the different outfits. I'm not very good at fighting games, and I think Dead or Alive's combat system is really interesting in that it's sort of easy to pick up and extremely difficult to master. I think while some people might not see it as technical as perhaps Guilty Gear or Street Fighter, I think Dead or Alive should be more appreciated than it already is. And I'm really hoping they turn the franchise around with 7, but for now, at least I've got Dead or Alive 5 Last Round. At number 7, we have Final Fantasy 15. One of the better Final Fantasies, I would say. This is another one of those like mid-2010s games where we had to decide that everything has to be open world. But then again, Final Fantasy was sort of the first open world way back in the later 1980s, up until probably Final Fantasy 9 or 10, I would say. But what Final Fantasy 15 does very well is, I think, in direct contrast with Am Satsuna, it brings epic to the RPG franchise. Final Fantasy 15 has the most epic boss battle that I have ever experienced. And I know epic is very often, I think, either misused or overused on the internet. But truly, I'm talking in terms of scale, it's just nothing that I've ever seen before. And that's true for several other of the boss fights, particularly the summon, the bosses that you face and then you get as a summon later. Nothing is able to compare with Final Fantasy 15. And I have no idea what they're going to do with 16, but I don't know if they can do anything as big as Final Fantasy 15 is. At number 6, we have Rise of the Tomb Raider. This is somewhat of an unexpected ranking on my part. When I was putting this whole list together, I thought Tomb Raider was going to be on the lower end. But in playing it again for this video to capture footage, I actually was like, oh no, I actually really want to finish this, and I'm going to tell you why. I think, well, the overarching story that involves Lara Croft, it's fine. It's like, whatever. Someone who is 2 or 3 years out of college is just murdering all of these highly trained spec ops dudes. I don't quite buy that. However, I love having offshoots of the Byzantine/Roman Empire in the middle of this mountain range. I love exploring all the different tombs. I like that the puzzles in the tombs are just sort of they're very simple, but when you're someone who's not very good at puzzle games, they're complicated just enough to at least make you feel a little bit of satisfaction when you complete them. I love climbing around all the tombs. I thought the reason this is actually higher than Uncharted was because I like The combat, I like that it's a little bit more technical than Uncharted, where Uncharted is just keep blasting guns everywhere. With Tomb Raider, you're a little bit more sneaky. It rewards, I think, being a little bit more skilled in the way you approach certain scenarios, and I think the climbing is very fun. When I think about games that I want to revisit, especially if I haven't finished them yet, Tomb Raider is definitely a game for the PS4 that, while I haven't finished it yet, I definitely want to. At number 5, appropriately, is Persona 5. This is an RPG that is very near and dear to my heart because it was sort of key to my channel kind of getting discovered by the YouTube algorithm when I played through all 120 hours of this game, translating it live from Japanese to English. That was a huge endeavor, but I did it because Persona 5 is so good. If you haven't played it yet, it is sort of like a combination of a regular traditional turn-based RPG, but then it adds in this weird, like almost Pokemon element because you're like collecting up different personas in order to use their special abilities. And it also includes sort of like visual novel aspects where you're like talking with your teammates, you're improving your relationship with them. The more your relationship improves, the more abilities you're able to use both on and off the battlefield. There is so much packed into this game, and I imagine one day it's going to be, if it's not already, $10 or $15. You get so much for your money out of this game that I think and it's really hard to go back to previous Personas because this game, I think, really opens up with a lot of excitement. Whereas, as opposed to like Persona 4, where it's like you have to go through like 2 hours of game in order to actually start like interacting with Persona 4. Whereas with Persona 5, there's a lot of story to it, but at least it starts off with some action. And that's why Persona 5 is so high on my list. At number 4, one of the later releases in the PS4's library, we have Ghost of Tsushima. And I was kind of hesitant to actually pick up and play it because I had a lot of expectations of this game and it surpassed every single one of them. It is able to mix Souls-like gameplay with an open world experience that I think has, at least from what I've played, not really been surpassed on the console, although I think we'll talk about one game that does open world, I think slightly better. However, it has all the aspects of a game that I could want, where it has not so much a focus on gear. You're not picking up like blue gear, purple gear, green gear. It's you pick up a piece of gear and you can upgrade it by doing certain things. It has liberating islands from the Mongols. That's great. I love I love the accoutrement of this game. I love the background of this game. The overall story is fine, but I think Ghost of Tsushima is able to overcome what I think is somewhat of a limited, overarching narrative to have lots of really fun interactions with all the people that you end up associating with. You take all of these quests to learn about the story. While a lot of the other games for the PS4 that I talked about when they're open world, they have a lot of what I like to call busy work, and I'm looking at you, Assassin's Creed. Ghost of Tsushima is what I felt like Assassin's Creed should have become, but Ghost of Tsushima was able to outdo Sucker Punch, the studio that developed this, was able to outdo Ubisoft at their own game. And while it may have certain things in the story that try to make you feel bad about doing, the stealth path through things instead of doing like the honorable samurai way of doing things, I just played this game like I did Assassin's Creed, and I had a hell of a lot of fun. Really loved Ghost of Tsushima. Definitely am going to go back to play this game. At number 3, perhaps the most personally important game on the PS4 for me personally is Kingdom Hearts 3. I waited to play this game for, I want to say like 12 years. Like when did Kingdom Hearts 2 come out? Like 06, 07? And I waited 12 years to play this game. I do not count all of the portable Kingdom Hearts games as Kingdom Hearts games. I only played the main games. And Kingdom Hearts 3 is truly the best Kingdom Hearts game. Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 feel like real old games. It is very difficult for me to recommend Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 to people who have not played the franchise, because those games start out just abysmally. Like, you're really just doing chores. Literally, in the second one, you're doing part-time jobs in order to get money to go out to like a beach somewhere. But what does Kingdom Hearts 3 do? It just throws you into the action. It cuts off all of the boring stuff. The action is really fun. Being able to do all of like the Disney park rides as little like super moves, and the boss battles, much like Final Fantasy 15, what Kingdom Hearts 3 did was, I think, add a little bit of epicness into what was already, a very exciting game. But Kingdom Hearts 3, I feel, is the biggest Kingdom Hearts game. And it's got the amazing soundtrack. Yoko Shimomura is a living Japanese national treasure. Kingdom Hearts 3 and Final Fantasy 15 have some of just the biggest sounding musical scores of any game that I have played so far. And it's cheap today. Kingdom Hearts 3, I would say, is very difficult to understand because of all of the side games, all of the background lore. But I think even the boss battle, even when you don't understand like the 20 other games that have come out, you're not really familiar with the story, even like I am not familiar with the story. The boss battle and the characters that are involved are so cool. Just being able to fight with Donald and Goofy, I think this is the true Kingdom Hearts game, and I highly recommend it. We're almost at the top 2, and I want to hide the top number 1 down here, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But Death Stranding. Much like Kingdom Hearts, Death Stranding and the Kojima-verse, as I like to call it, is a bit impenetrable, where no matter what language you're playing this game in, you're not going to understand 95% of what's going on. But what keeps you moving forward? Well, for me in Death Stranding, what I liked was, for one, you actually don't shoot anybody. You could theoretically, but what I think is so fascinating about this game is it is the ultimate walking simulator where you're just building stuff. I had the best time in this game going and collecting resources and building roads. That's my favorite thing to do in Settlers of Catan. It was my favorite thing to do in Death Stranding. Now, there are some really janky parts where you're not going to understand the story, and I do actually wish that there are some shooting sequences in this where you're shooting ghost zombies. I don't know what to call them, but I kind of wish that was maybe put in a different game. I kind of wish it was just exclusively using a gun that shoots a rope that ties up your enemies when you're going in to get their base, and you're going in to get all their ceramic material and their metal. But man, I don't even know how to describe the main story. I just know that being able to transport stuff around, it's like Truck Simulator, it's Train Simulator, 2019 or whenever this thing came out. But Death Stranding, I cannot say enough good things about this game. What then could be number 1 for the PS4? Why, yes, it is Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. The single best experience I've had with a video game, I would say, in what is now the last generation of consoles. I can't think of a game that I've had a better time with. It does open world, but it does it without the weird, complicated loot systems where you need to be constantly getting better and better gear. It does it without the busy work. It's got the captivating story. It's got the stealth. It's got the guns. What is remarkable about Metal Gear Solid 5 is that there are actually parts of it that feel unfinished in terms of the story. There's obviously a lot of different things that Kojima wanted to do with this game, but just wasn't able to do because of drama or limited resources or whatever. Despite this being what is essentially an unfinished game, it reigns supreme over these other games that I have talked about for the PlayStation, simply because it is the best controlling, the best feeling, and I think has one of the more intriguing stories that I have encountered. Metal Gear Solid is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite franchise, and this is the best game in that franchise. I would say this is definitely in my top 5, if not top 3 favorite games of all time.